Hello and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lomeo. Each episode I bring another business leader who's doing awesome and amazing things, and this episode is no different. I am delighted to have Melissa Bouma, who is the CEO of Manifest, on the show today. She has an amazing story, awesome career, and so much to share. It's going to be a great conversation. Take a listen. Hey Melissa, how are you?
Hi Laura, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm still jealous about the Beyonce tickets. Just gonna say, still jealous.
I feel you. I feel you. So, but we've got to get you out to the next one.
This is true. We'll get there. We'll get there. So obviously we're in the summer, but I want to take you back to like your youth. So tell me, Melissa, what was your first job?
So my first job was actually at an independent bookstore. I was a little bit of a book nerd, still am. And so I would sit at one of the cash registers and it was rarely busy and I would just read all the books. So that was my first job.
Wait a second. You were at the bookstore and your job was to read. How did you swing this?
Well, my job was not to read. My job was actually to, ring people up and sit at the cashier, but it was an independent bookstore, so it wasn't a ton of foot traffic. And so I got to fill the downtime by reading, which was great because you're obviously in a bookstore and, you can grab things that you might not have on hand. And that was before audiobooks and that was before Kindles and everything else. So it was just hard paper books.
Oh, wow. What was your favorite book that you think you got to read when you were there?
Oh, that is such a good question. There was an author I really liked called Wally Lamb that wrote fiction. I think there was a book called She's Come Undone, which was kind of my first foray into school telling me what I had to read type of fiction. And it kind of dealt with mental health with some of the characters. And that was one of my favorite ones that kind of ignited me on my recreational reading, I guess you'd say.
Awesome. I love Wally Lamb too. That's fantastic. So, and no, the best part, I love bookstores when I was a kid and I still love them too. I love the smell of old books. And There is something just really it doesn't matter how old you are. All of a sudden you get transported to be back as a kid and fascinated by the book covers and reading the back covers and seeing, maybe I should do this.
Looking at the spines, looking at just all the different titles and just maybe grabbing something you might not have grabbed.
Yeah, it's it's kind of like when you go shopping and you have no intention of buying anything and then you end up walking past the store and then you find something and then $20 later, look how stuff I bought. So
I know that world well because my next job was actually in retail. So those mannequins and those windows are intentional. So I'm glad they were.
They suck you in. So obviously, being an amazing cashier at an independent bookstore must have been awesome. But you've had an amazing journey since then. So let's talk about that. How did you get to be sitting here with me? What was that journey like till now?
Sure. I was actually, I think I just mentioned it. I started out in retail after college because I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. So I went into retail, and in retail, I kind of made my way to managing a boutique chain. That boutique chain had an e-commerce presence, and there was something called SEO back in the day in the early 2000s that I started to try to teach myself and learn, and then ended up realizing that I really liked it. And I thought that it was very interesting to think about how you could persuade things to happen through an algorithm. And so I made the move from retail management over to SEO. And I ended up running an SEO firm, which was acquired by the entity that is now Manifest. So I came to be here through the avenue of SEO. So I am a left brain strategist who cut her teeth in SEO in the 2000s when it was a lot easier than it is now.
I was going to say, what's probably been the biggest change? Because you have literally, I hate to say you're an OG, but you kind of are, because you've seen everything change from it being, hey, there's this new thing called Google, to there's, OpenAI. So what's been the thing that you've been wait a second, this is huge?
So I think you're kind of hitting on it right there, especially when we just talk specifically about SEO. What's changed? I mean, you used to try to manipulate the algorithm or influence it. And now the algorithm is so smart that it really does need to be authentic. You actually have to be relevant for what you want to rank for or have visibility for, and you actually have to have authority. So I think it's just that, that automation and that artificial intelligence can discern some of the things that used to be more intangible, like authority. And you used to be able to do things to kind of influence it the way you want. And now you have to be relevant and you have to be authoritative. And so I think that's actually really nice. You have to work on your business, not work on your SEO.
Yeah, you can't rely on SEO to do magic
Right.
and convince folks. It is all about like the authenticity of what you're bringing to the table, or don't even try.
Totally. Totally.
So obviously, being a woman in this side of the house is obviously not easy. Talk to me about a time you had a challenge. You're like, there's no
Yeah.
way I'm getting through this, and then you're like, yep, I'm gonna make this happen.
Of course. I think, it would definitely be a challenge that was because I am a woman, which, would have been in the early years of having my kids. When I first had the kids, I had always been really motivated in my career to kind of like forge my path in advertising and in the agency world, which was not always as friendly towards women. You have to
Not
work
at
twice
all.
as hard. And so when I had the kids, I remember it was tough, and there weren't a whole lot of female leaders to have to talk to about like how to balance chasing your career and then being like a present parent, which was a big goal of mine. So I would say probably those first years of them being babies were my biggest challenge in figuring out if I was going to be able to do both. Um, and then finding my way through it. I tend to use when I'm talking to, parents now and they're talking about that struggle. I'm like, listen, you don't always have to be in the fast lane. It is okay to move into the center lane for a moment and kind of get your footing as you're coming out of leave or whatever you're going through, even if it's not having children. And then you can get back in the fast lane and you can do both and you can have both. And that was not as easy to do, at least not in my experience in my early years.
I love that. You don't have to be in the fast lane. You can choose the slow lane. Because I feel like folks, I'll put myself in this category where it's like, oh, I have to do all this stuff. And once I've done all this stuff, then I can start a family. And so you're in this
Mhm.
fast lane. And I feel like I'm now, not that I've gone over to the slow lane, but like I can see the off ramp to what that could potentially
Yeah,
look like. And it's not
yeah,
as scary as it was when I first started out my career.
yeah. And to know that you can give yourself a moment to say, hey, I'm going to take, these next months to just get my footing under me, and then I'm going to be driven again. It doesn't always have to be, to overuse the driving analogy, like pedal to the metal. Um, so it's about the long game, I guess. And you've been through that.
Yeah, it is very much it is very much the long game, and it's twisty and it's turny, and you're just like, okay, cool, well, I will figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
obviously we had a really insane past few years. Um,
Yes.
how did you navigate that? Because had you all done your merger yet, or was that happening as this was going on? Like, how did you navigate during the COVID times?
Oh, yeah, that was and continues to be still something that is really just shaping our business. So I will say on the positive side of things, we have 4 different studios and in 4 different geographies. So we were pretty good with the Zoom culture and with that type of virtual and way of working together. We were all in office, but still we needed to use Zoom quite a bit to talk to our other colleagues. What was really hard, and I think what continues to be really hard, is that, hybrid and having people in the office, just from my experience and from my perspective, there's a lack of connectivity that's still happening. And there's just different points of view on what the right way to be is. And I think we're still trying to find our footing in how we work together, how often we're together in office, and how often we're not. And we haven't mandated anything. So, I think you asked, how did we cope with it? One day at a time, one week at a time. I will say our specialty is in content, so we did fairly well in the space. But as far as the people aspect of it, I think it's shaping our culture, and we're still wrestling a little bit with what that environment's going to be like.
Yeah, so this is the thing. I think we're all struggling with this now. It's like once you go home, it's really hard to get you out of your pajamas. So, but like there is this thing where, like, how do we get folks back into the office consistently? And, is it 3 days a week? Is it 2 days a week? Is it, a 4-day work week? Have you guys sort of begun to crack the code on like what seems working well for your teams?
Yeah, we're trying to call people in as we are having, town halls, as we're having all agency meetings, when we're doing planning sessions or creative ideation. So when there's those moments where that chemistry in person really just makes the work better, we're asking people to get together for that. We have, like I said, we haven't mandated that, but we are saying, hey, we're going to do this strategy session next Thursday together. So plan to be together. And that's working for us right now.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, we're doing the 3-day a week thing at our agency, and it did working. So,
I was going to ask, how's that going for you guys?
Yeah, it's, look, I think everything. Look, it's a challenge. I think, I mean, I was kind of only half joking about the fact that how to get people out of their pajamas. It's just like, the thing that worked well when we were, knee deep in COVID times, that you were able to get on a camera and then just be home and take care of what you need to take care of. But I do think that, like, in a business where you're so much so is the face to face and like sitting down in the corner and just doing a little brainstorming and coming up with things, it's missing. As someone who's in events, it's interesting to me because I think about what my life used to be like. Oh, I have a breakfast event in the morning. I have a lunch event in the middle of the day. I have a cocktail thing, and then and I'd be going to a dinner. The idea of doing that right now is like, absolutely not.
Sounds exhausting. But there's also something so interesting about the energy that when you kind of get your muscle memory back, right, for the in-person and for the face-to-face time. I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of energy when I am leaving either like a client in person or a strategy session. There's just something about physical chemistry, I think, that just can't be replicated through Zoom.
No, you really can't. I think, and it's interesting because we've started doing pitches in person again, and as well as in person, like town halls, all those things. And one of the things that I thought that I wouldn't be able to do again, that like I am kind of amazing on panels, and like no humble bragging here, brag. And so. But like it was one of those things where I was like, am I gonna be able to like get myself psyched up to do this again after like not doing that for almost 3 years? And it's interesting because I think I've definitely found a different groove. So, and it's still awesome, but it's definitely different, but it's still resonating with folks. And I've noticed with some other of my colleagues too, how I saw them present previously, pre-COVID, and how they present now are different. They're still awesome, but there is like a fundamental way that you, I don't know if it's the way you stand, the way you sound, it definitely has changed over the last few years.
Yeah, and so much of really those interactions, and probably one of the reasons that you are so good, Greg, on panels is because you're playing off of people's energy. Like you're reading them, you're trying to understand what they're interested in, how their body language changes as they react to different comments. And then that means you can further engage them. That's something that I try to practice very much as well, which is really understanding, what kind of headspace someone's in, what they're looking for, what their real like want is, and then how do I engage them? And that is so much easier, right? When you can have that sense of them in person.
It really is like that. I think it's like we were all kind of like, oh my gosh, can I actually do this again? And now you're like, okay, cool. But you pick up different things that you may not have even noticed pre-COVID that you notice now. I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
much more attentive to like spotting if I see someone who's like maybe not totally into it and like nurturing and bringing that person in closer earlier.
Yes,
Yeah, I think as leaders, we set the tone for a lot of this stuff and how we
right.
come across, how we keep our doors as open as possible so that folks know that they can come and engage with us.
Exactly. I think that's very well said. I mean, we have to go first, right? Be first one into the fire in all things. That way we can show them, like, I'm not asking you to do something that I don't believe I need as well.
It's so necessary. It kind of harkens back to when I think about our younger selves. And so,
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, what do you
Yeah.
think you tell 18-year-old Melissa?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think I would probably give her some of the best career advice that I've been given. There is an amazing brand marketer. You might know her, Shannon Watkins. She is currently the global CMO for the Jordan brand. And I've had the privilege of, knowing her through Aflac when she was the CMO of Aflac. And she told me it is unkind to be unclear. And just that clarity of that advice really stuck. And that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self, which is not to always try to beat around the bush, because I think that's something we do when we're younger. We try to make things more flowery. We try to be very like thoughtful about people's feelings, but sometimes that lack of clarity is not what people need. So I would just tell myself, think about the right way to have empathetic candor and try to be clear and tell people the truth in a kind, caring way.
That's so important.
Mm-hmm.
I, I, it's like stamp on the Louvre because I think this is it. Like this is that breaks down the fundamental thing I think we oftentimes have in our industry, where people don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and
Mm-hmm.
so as a result of that, we will dance around this thing for the next 55 minutes when we could have just solved this in 5 minutes.
Exactly. Or maybe we don't give somebody the feedback that they need to actually grow, because we do appreciate them and we do want to cater to their feelings, but sometimes it holds them back not to know that, they have room for growth. But at the same time, we should also, of course, counterbalance that with when things are going well, and being clear about that too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like there's been a lot of chatter about how Gen Z employees are like, no longer
Mm-hmm.
take anything. And it's like if they don't feel safe, they're out. And it's interesting that you say that you gave that piece of advice, because I think in this crazy world that we're in, it's
Mm-hmm.
imperative that you get to the heart of what's going on and not try and beat around the bush. But then the flip side is you have this, well, if you're going to be too stern, I don't want to listen, so therefore I'm not going to listen. You're like, oh, goodness.
Yes, yes. And I know, everything I've learned from stepping in the wrong place, right? Okay, don't step there, or that didn't work. And so I think I totally hear you. Gen Z is more protective, I guess we might say, of their mental health, which I think is honestly something we can all learn from. But at what point does it also close you off from, information or feedback or conversations that grow you? Because we're always still growing, especially as we're younger. Those are our opportunity years.
Yeah, I think that, and I would agree with you. I think the issue is that they've never actually been told they're not awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, if the first person who ever tells them they're not awesome is their boss, it gets taken to heart in a really challenging way versus I'm not trying to crush you into 1,000 pieces, but I am saying to you, yeah,
Yes.
here's how we have to get to this. I'm
Exactly.
not, but I want to ruin your life. I'm not. This is not going to ruin your life. Like it's not. You're not going to die if someone tells you that you just are not awesome at this particular thing at this particular moment.
Yeah,
And
and this is the thing that we need to work on, right? So let's think about it that way. But to your point, there's been a few times, many times I'll say, over the course of my career, right, that we either, whether it's us or it's people around others, there's so many compliments given and maybe not the other side of the coin. And then people come to management or whomever looking for growth. And the answer is you're not ready. And they're blindsided. They're like, what do you mean I'm not ready? Everybody loves me. And we're like, well, yes, everybody loves you, but these are your growth areas. And that I think is actually more hurtful. And I think that's what, that person was trying to say when they say it's actually unkind to be unclear, because many times people truly don't know that that's something they should have been working on.
or it's something you should have seen. Like,
Right.
it's also like, one, the road is extremely long. Step one. Step two, the world is extremely small. Like, no matter what you think, the world is small, infinitesimally small. I am consistently reminded of this on a weekly basis about how small the world is. I'm like, oh wow. So it's
Especially our
important,
space.
especially our space, and so we all end up knowing each other. And it's one of those things where it's just like, hey, like just get to the heart of it. Like it's not like, again, I am not going to kick your puppy, but I just want to let you know, hey, like here's some things that you can do a little bit better, like. Or
Right.
like taking like some of my team was like, I want to be you when I grow up, and I'm like, no, like absolutely not. Like, are you gonna become a 5'7" black woman? No. So, but what you can follow from me is that I have screwed up tons of times,
Right.
and but I had to have people through my experience tell me when I screwed up, and so I always use the example of that. Like, I talk really fast.
Mhm.
From my mom. This was the first person to tell me that I talk too fast. And I've had many a boss tell me I talk too fast. And it wasn't until like I actually heard myself once where I was like, wow, you're going really fast. Okay. I took that
I
to heart.
am
And
literally shaking my head right now because I had that same experience where I had a boss tell me that I use the phrase, you know what I mean? Too many times at the end of every statement. And I was mortified. And then the next time I heard myself speak, I was like, he's right.
right. So now I've figured out a way, because like I'm mildly dyslexic. So it's one of my many quirks that I have. So I'm like, okay, cool. How do I figure this out? What can I do to slow myself down? So I oftentimes talk with my hands, which weirdly slows me down.
And
So
I can see that. It probably is also what makes you a bit of the creative genius, right? Is that the animation, and that all gets back to that in-person thing we were talking about too, which is when you can see someone's hand gestures, you can kind of feel their excitement and their energy.
yeah, and you're saying the thing, because I get this all the time. But for me, the reason I talk with my hands so much is I can slow myself down by seeing my hands move. And it was a thing where it's like a thing that I thought they were just being mean to me about. When I figured out how to properly harness it, is now a strength. Because
Mhm.
I always get Laura super animated and so cool when she talks. Now, because like the thing that I'm doing to sort of take that feedback to heart and figure out how to overcome it or utilize it in a better way has now become a strength. And I'm sure with the same thing with you, if you don't do you know what I mean anymore, and you probably get right to it, and everyone appreciates that, right?
Absolutely. It is definitely one of those stop words or stop phrases, if you will, that I listen for, and I'm very cognizant of it. And I love the conversation and where it's going to, because really it's about being introspective. There's so many things that we cannot change, but what we can always change is ourselves and work on ourselves. So just hearing feedback and then saying, okay, I might be mad at first, but then I'm going to ingest this and then I'm going to like digest this. And then I'm going to think about how I take this on tomorrow or next week or whenever that is. I think that's the song or the sign of a strong person.
Yeah, just look, I think we are all imperfect. As I was saying, like you're gonna have to have those moments where you're not awesome, and it not kill you either. Like, I don't want you to crumble into 1,000 pieces. But just know that, like, hey, there's things that there's always ways you can improve. All of us are always continuing to learn and evolve. Look, we've all had to become completely different leaders that we were 3 years ago.
Exactly. If we had any idea what was coming in front of us, we probably would have ran the other way, but we did what we needed to do and we're stronger for it. And I think there's a lot of good that also came out of that experience, because I think a lot of businesses, companies, agencies, whatever, realized, how strong the teams actually were and how flexible we could be.
Yeah, and the resilience of your teams and the folks who rocked with you who stayed. Think about how everyone had this moment of like, I can do anything I want. I can be anywhere I want. And this is where I want to be. So it's a testament to the leadership that folks have, present company obviously included, that folks stayed and kept going. So, kind of harkening back to the thing that I think came out of COVID in a new way that, took away a lot of the not shame, but more like, I don't really talk about that. And especially from the leadership side of the world, was like self-care and taking care of ourselves and how very, very important that is. So, Melissa, what do you do for your self-care?
Ooh, that is such a good question. Well, that is also, as we were just talking about, always still a work in progress. But, I do still like to read. I like to, for the most part, try to be somewhat active. I like yoga. I like to just get some separate space and try to meditate once in a while. So I think it's usually just stepping away from the desk, if you will, and trying to have some time where I just push the thoughts that try to come in. I don't know if you go through this, but there will be nights, of course, I'm laying in bed and, this opportunity or that conversation pop into my head. And I try, not always great about this, but I try to be very intentional to say, like, okay, I'm not going to think about this right now. I'm going to sleep and I will address this tomorrow. Otherwise, that's part of the blur, I guess, between home and work is, and also just a facet of being a leader. It always creeps in and you have to give yourself some boundaries. So I think that's probably what I do for self-care, is try to give myself some space to just not think about it.
Yes, it's okay to leave it at your bedroom door. It'll be outside there in the morning, but you can shut the door and be like, yep, no, thank you. I'm going to go to sleep.
And just recognizing those moments where you're like, you know what, my brain is not going to turn this over in the way that it needs to. I need some space from it. And usually I'll come back to it more energized or just with a better perspective. I can tell when my brain is getting tired.
Yeah, because like if it's running around in your head as the last thing you do before you go to sleep, it'll be the first thing you think of when you get up in the morning, and that is good for nobody.
Nope.
Really not.
Nope. All humans sleep. So I totally agree. So I think just finding those boundaries for yourself, that's the right way to be. And then finding the things. What do you do for self-care?
Well, I have what I call Laura Day. So every third Sunday of the month is my day. So I go to the spa. And I usually go to brunch with some friends, but like the spa thing is for real, like my thing. Like to the point where they know me by a first name basis. So, and it's a very bougie spa. I don't care. It's just
I like it. You deserve it. You deserve it.
But also I do the gratitude journal every morning. Like I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, and that's always a really good grounding way for me to wake up every morning.
That's
Meditation to me are hard. I really try. My brain just goes too fast. So hence the gratitude journal is basically the effectiveness of me doing meditation. But also, look, I think it's really important to again exercise, do Pilates, do go for. I also do the walk thing because obviously I live in the city, so I try and get a walk in some, especially in the summertime, like on a Saturday or a Friday, and just like walk a few miles, ride my bike, and shut off this. Also, I have to say, it's a golden age of TV. There is so much TV I have not watched because I've been busy for like a decade that I'm catching up on.
There's so much to binge watch and to enjoy, and you get, there's the variety and the breadth is wide. So I love
It's
that.
so wide. I just started watching Only Murders in the Building with like Steve Martin and Selena Gomez and Martin Short. I God,
On my list.
this show is hilarious. It's so quirky and so weird, but like it's just adorable. Because I remember hearing about the show being like, this sounds ridiculous. What? And I started like 2 weeks ago. I just like stumbled across it because God bless Hulu. See, also the
Yep.
problem, like how we're supposed to be cord cutters and have less of these things. Why do I have Netflix, HBO Max, I refuse to call it Max, Peacock, Paramount, Hulu, Showtime, as well as cable? Like,
Of course. And I can answer that for you because I'm at a content agency. It's because we are consuming content at a rapid, like incremental rate, which is to your point. There's two sides of it. You got to make sure you're cutting it off, but at the same time, we're just so hungry for content that actually all of those channels can thrive. It's crazy, right?
it's so nuts. Because the thing is, I'm never home. I travel a ton. So when I am home, I have choices. It's like, okay, which one of these? And I think the advent of smart TVs has also caused this problem. Because
Yeah.
before you had Roku, you had to plug in the Roku. No, I'm smart TVs. I just turn it on. I'm like, oh, I can just like go right here, pick that, and then I start binging.
It's very
And
easy. And it's smart and it knows what you like. So it gives you just the right options.
it's like the content play that they do where they serve up the exact thing I want to watch is disturbing and amazing. Like the advertiser in me is like, this is brilliant. On the Laura side of me, like, how did you know I wanted to watch that next? Weird. Like, very
Exactly.
weird.
I feel like I do the same thing where it's very interesting to consume any kind of content being in our industry and where we're from because I can watch an ad, I can read an article, I can watch a show, and I know exactly, or I try to guess what the insight was that drove it. And I also appreciate, the piece of content. Like, I bet you they're talking to XYZ audience.
Exactly. It's like it's very weird. Like again, our brains are like are wired this way. We're like, oh my God. Like I can see what you were all doing here, but like I have fallen for the trap as well. So good marketing on it.
That look like.
It's brilliantly amazing. This has been such a delight, Melissa. So last question for you.
Okay.
Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
A give and an ask of the audience?
Yeah, so give could be, hey, here's a great book. Ask would be like, here's something I wish you all would do for yourselves. Whatever you want.
Oh, I like that. Okay. So as a give, I think I'll just take a cue from the conversation we were having, which is I would just give the audience like, please try to give yourself space between all of the technology and information that bombards us. There's just something so beautiful about not being on any kind of device. I think an ask of the audience would be, I don't know, maybe give us some insights from this podcast in the spirit of always getting better. What was helpful and what wasn't helpful.
Awesome. I love that. Great one. Doing insight service on my podcast. I appreciate it. Awesome. Well, Melissa, you are just an absolute delight. It was so lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And we'll put all details in the show notes for folks to connect with you and learn more about Manifest. And that is our